Okay. Good with new business, old business. All right, 7:10 p.m., discussion, Scituate wind turbine. This is an opportunity right now for Scituate wind turbine to talk about the windmill and stuff that's happened. Mr. Gordon Dean, President of Palmer Capital Corporation, will be presenting, and I hope we get respect to allow him to give his presentation. At the end of his presentation, it'll be an opportunity for the board to ask some questions, and then I'll open it up to the floor. I'd rather not have any interruptions. I'd like a nice, smooth meeting, and to have him follow through. So with that said, also, too, at the end, when questions are asked, please give your name and address to Ms. Montanari so she can put that in the record. Do appreciate that.
They come through you. The questions come through you.
And yes, well, yeah, all questions will come through the chair. So, all right. With that said, I give the floor to you.
Last time we were here, I'm positive they had a TV screen and we did a display. And I was told by Sue, who you asked to be here, couldn't make it, so I asked him to attend. He assured me that you guys had a TV screen, all I had to do was plug it in, so I didn't have that. Fortunately, I did print a couple copies for you, and I'll just try to present to the audience here, if that's okay. Pardon me if I end up turning my back to you once in a while.
No, that's okay. Just keep a loud and clear voice.
I will try my best. My name is Gordon Dean. The chair mentioned I was president of Palmer Capital, which I am. I'm also president of Palmer Management. Palmer Management is actually the managing member for the Scituate Wind LLC, which is effectively a joint venture between the Palmer folks and the Solea folks who were originally bid to build the wind turbine project. We were asked to give some information, background on the timeline for the project, talk about what other wind projects there are in Massachusetts and New England, talk a little bit about what studies we did to do the permitting for the project, to address what we've heard in terms of the neighbors' concerns. We're also going to talk about what findings have come out from various expert panels on the health effects of wind, make some comments on that, and then talk about what the next steps might be and open it up for questions, as you said. This project in Scituate has been in development for quite a while. 2005, the selectmen appointed a renewable energy committee. They did several studies. They had funds from MTC, which is the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative, to look at whether wind would make sense in Scituate. They completed a study, and it went to the town's planning board. Town meeting had a vote which authorized the lease of this particular property where we're located. Requests for proposals were issued. Solea Energy, along with Palmer Capital, bid on the project, and we were selected to develop that. That was in 2009. I don't do PowerPoints, which you probably know by now. In 2010, we did a number of permitting reviews. We don't have everything listed here. We looked at what's the visual impact, what's the acoustical impact of the turbine, icing analysis, FAA, we need federal permits, we need Master Public Transportation permits, have to do an interconnection study with National Grid. Went through quite a long process, including getting a special permit from the town of Scituate. That was in 2010. In 2011, we closed on financing with a local bank. We commenced construction, ordered the turbines. Turbines take a while for delivery. They were delivered in January of 2012. Some of you may remember we had a major blade signing ceremony on the only day it snowed last winter. We couldn't have picked a better day. And we really appreciated the turnout. We had people on with their sleds, bringing their kids. And, yeah, thought it was a good celebration. In March, the project went online. There was an Earth Day celebration in April. And just to let you know, we have a contract that we have with Scituate. We sell all the power that is produced from the project for an initial period of 15 years with potential for 2 5-year extensions on that. Our lease can be extended at our option for 2 5-year periods. It's up to the town whether they want to keep buying power at that point in time from the project. We were asked about how many wind turbines are there in Massachusetts. The turbine that's installed in Scituate is approximately a 1,500 kW. It is a 1,500 kW turbine. There's 65,000 kilowatts of wind power capacity installed in Massachusetts, approximately 86 wind turbines. 9 of those are installed at schools. I think you're familiar with the one probably familiar with the one in Hull. Hull actually has 2 turbines, a much larger one. And there are at least 36 turbines installed of the capacity that we have here in Scituate. I'm not going to go through this. It's just a list of the projects. It's an indication of ones that Scituate Wind Partners have been involved in, primarily through Solea or Loomis Construction that's built many of these projects. And it's a long list. We're not going to read it all. In New England, there's almost 800 megawatts of installed wind capacity. 3 of those projects have been found by the state to be not in accordance with the state noise standards. One is in Final Haven, which is in Maine. There's the Falmouth 1 turbine. There's 2 turbines in Falmouth owned by the town of Falmouth. And there's a 3rd turbine in Falmouth. One is found to be not in compliance. And there's the Mars Hill project, which is much larger, which exceeds the state standard, but is within its permit range.
Where is that?
Western Mass. Don't worry, we're not doing 20 turbines in Scituate.
Just reference.
Yeah. What were some of the studies we did? In the special permit application, we did analyses of sound, of flicker, visual impact. We discussed icing and the issues dealing with blades getting ice on them. And of course, did feasibility studies for the overall economics of the project. These have all been referenced in the special permit that has been issued by the town to the project. Scituate has its own zoning bylaw dealing with wind. It basically says the wind facility has to comply with the state noise standards. And it requires us to prepare an analysis by an engineer to demonstrate that it will meet those standards, and that I'll get into that in a few minutes. For your information, the noise standard in Massachusetts is that you can not have a source which increases broadband sound by more than 10 decibels, or a pure tone condition by more than 3 decibels. Generally, wind turbines do not produce a pure tone, so it's not an issue, but it was looked at in our study. There's a little, most people aren't familiar with decibels and how they're measured. Decibels is sort of on a logarithmic chart, so a small change in sound can have a major impact. A 10 dBA increase is effectively a doubling of the sound. And on the chart you have some samples of various noise levels. Generally, you're in a 35 to 45 range for background noise in residential areas. So the analysis that we did for the project here in Scituate, initially we did background sound measurements. We measured sound at the wastewater treatment plant property line for several nights in winter conditions. You measure what's called the L90. You measure all the noise, but you calculate the L90, which is the noise which is exceeded 90% of the time. and that's what the state standard says. You can't be more than 10 decibels louder than that. We were not satisfied with the initial study that was done for us. We didn't think it went far enough. We asked them to come back. They did additional background noise measurements on the driftway, on 10th Street, new driftway, and you won't be able to see this. The turbine is down over here, and these were the places where the noise measurements were taken and where projections were made. The wind, as you can imagine, has an effect on the noise itself. The windier it is, the more noise the wind is going to be generating as it blows through the trees, rustles the leaves, and things like that. So you look at both what we call the cut-in speed, at what wind speed will the turbine start operating, because it doesn't operate all the time, because not enough wind, it's not going to operate. And also what's called the design wind speed, when it's putting it out at its maximum output. The measurements that were taken showed approximately 37 dBA at the property line under low wind conditions and 45 dBA under higher wind conditions. And you can see from the table that in all cases, on this initial study that was done, the increase in sound level was less than the 10 dBA. I think we had 7.1 dBA here at the property line. 151 Driftway is the closest residence. As I said, we asked our consultant to go back and look at other sites around in the neighborhood. They looked at both daytime conditions and nighttime conditions to determine what the increase would be. Generally, during the day, noise levels are higher, so you see there's much less increase in the sound level. It ranges from 1 to just under 2 dBA. Nighttime, the increase was as much as 7.5 dBA, not at the closest receptor. The closest receptor is exposed to noise at the wastewater treatment plant. Actually, you get farther away from the wastewater treatment plant, it's quieter, and so hence the increase in noise at strangely enough farther away from the turbine could be higher than right next to the turbine because of the noise from the wastewater treatment plant. So again, nearest residents had an increase of 4.5 to 4.8 dBA, and the maximum increase that was shown on the study that we did was 7.5 dBA. Again, the state standard is a 10 dBA increase. So those results were presented to the town's planning board for a special permit. They accepted those results that we met with the town's bylaw requirements. Another issue that's come up is flicker. Flicker is basically having the turbine between you and the sun. You can be looking at the blades going around with the sun behind it. It's going to produce flicker, and that flicker could just be the sun blinking on and off if you're far enough away. If you're closer, you may actually catch a portion of the shadow from the wind turbine. And the general rule of thumb is that if you're at least 1,000 meters away, that any shadow is negligible. It's going to, obviously, the farther away you get from the turbine, the less the shadow is going to be. Flicker is not a concern for people think about flicker causing epilepsy. That's not a concern. That's been looked at many times. There is no regulation in the Scituate bylaw for flicker. There's no regulation at the state level for flicker, or the federal level. The state has put together what they call a model wind bylaw, and they say that the applicant, when applying for a permit, to prove that the effect doesn't have a significant adverse impact on the neighborhood. Again, that's another study that we did. It's fairly easy. We know when the sun's going to come up. We know when the sun's going to go down. We know where it's going to be at any point in time. Very easy to predict what area is going to get a potential shadow from the wind turbine. But we also know, unfortunately, it's not always sunny. It's not always windy. So what the model does is calculate based upon historical averages when the wind's going to be blowing and how much cloud cover you're going to have, how strong the sun's going to be. And that's all incorporated into the model to come up with what is the expected level of flicker that's going to be seen in the neighborhood. It doesn't account for, if a house's window is behind a tree, it's not going to, you're not going to see the turbine, you're not going to see that could have a flicker issue. If you're behind another building, you're not going to catch the flicker, catch the shadow. The model is based on what we call the greenhouse mode, is that all the windows in your house are glass and they're all facing the turbine. In the industry, again, there are no standards, but in the industry, it's commonly accepted that people will tolerate up to 30 hours per year of flicker. In our study, we did find 2 sites which exceeded 30 hours, and those sites and that conclusion was acknowledged in our special permit. You're not going to be able to see this. This is a map of all the areas that were looked at and their distance from the turbine out to basically 3,000 feet, 3,300 feet, or approximately 1,000 meters. And these are the locations that were analyzed in the study. It literally goes from A to Z. As I said, I don't know if you can see this back there, but the flicker is fairly predictable. The sun's going to come up. It's going to come up in the east. It's going to set in the west. It's going to go up and down depending on the season. So you can tell sort of where the shadow is going to be cast. So you get the sort of butterfly effect of the impact. Obviously, if you were north of the turbine or south of the turbine, you're not going to get flicker because you're not going to have the sun north of you or south of you. Neighbors' concerns. Project started operating in March, and it really wasn't until August that we heard from the town that anybody had come in and complained about it. Up to that point, all the response we had from the town was very supportive. As I said, we saw people who came out for the blade signing event, people who came out for Earth Day celebration. Again, not the best prepared for that, but still fairly well attended. When we first started hearing about noise, we heard people complaining about they didn't like the looks of it. And then some of them said they could hear it. Again, we never said when we built the project that it couldn't be heard. In fact, we said just the opposite, that there were areas that you would be able to hear it at times. Recently, we've heard people talking about flicker and also about potential health effects from wind turbines. This slide, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. We have one person who wrote into the Patriot Ledger said, I find there could be something quite magnificent about these turbines. They stand as demonstration of the power of nature with their motion and reminder of the unseen energy that surrounds it. That was back in April. In August, somebody wrote in, who put that ugly thing there? What a monstrosity. So people feel differently about it, and I understand. I've I've walked World's End with my two children. One thinks it's a beautiful sight to see the one in the hall, and one doesn't like it. What can I say? There have been concerns about sound. Again, we've always said there would be sound from the turbines. We've said that we believe it complies with Mass DEP noise regulations and with the Scituate bylaw. We still believe that. If we were to determine that it was not operating within the regulatory requirements, clearly we would do something about that. Flicker was looked at in the special permitting process. We did the calculations that we normally do when we're permitting a project. And again, those calculations were accepted as part of our special permit approval process. So again, what do the experts say? There's been a lot of talk about health effects. And I think, at least the board knows, I don't know how many people in the audience know, that Mass DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health commissioned an independent expert panel to study the health effects of wind turbines. They issued a report in January 2012. The experts were 7 individuals from Boston University, Harvard, University of Massachusetts, University of New England, with backgrounds in public health, epidemiology, toxicology, neurology, sleep medicine, neuroscience, mechanical engineering. They reviewed scientific literature, popular media, and they also received many public comments. That study is available on the web at DEP's website. I'm not going to go through everybody who was on that panel, but I have a list of the people and their backgrounds. What were their conclusions? A series of these. There's insufficient, these are direct quotes from the study, there's insufficient evidence that the noise from wind turbines is directly, i.e. independently, an effect on annoyance or sleep, causing health problems or disease. Claims that infrasound have an impact on the vestibular system, not been demonstrated scientifically. No evidence for a set of health effects known as a wind turbine syndrome. And if you've been looking online for health impacts, that's the big one that Nina Pierpont has been pushing, her so-called wind turbine syndrome. Again, this study said there was no evidence that such a thing exists. Another conclusion from the study talks about the strongest epidemiological study, says there's not an association between noise from wind turbines and measures of psychological distress. None of the limited epidemiological evidence suggests an association between noise, pain, stiffness, diabetes, high blood pressure, tinnitus, hearing impairment, cardiovascular disease, and headache, migraines. Unfortunately, if you go on the web these days, you can find a lot of information. Not all of it is necessarily good. Just because it's on the web doesn't mean it's accurate information. And wind turbines have been blamed for just about anything you can think of in terms of a health effect. Again, these are not my conclusions. These are conclusions from the Department of Public Health expert panel. And again, I think I mentioned this earlier, scientific evidence suggests that shadow flicker does not pose a risk for seizures as a result of the photic stimulation. And this is not the only study. My own background is, I have a degree from Harvard School of Public Health. We take public health very seriously. We have been watching the Nina Pierponts and others who are out there talking about wind turbines. We're not, there have been quite a few studies. And on this PowerPoint, there's a link to several studies. There was one in Oregon that came out just at the same time. The one came out in Massachusetts in January of this year. There was one in Ontario, Canada, Australia, The American Wind Energy Association and the Canadian Wind Energy Association hired an expert panel to look at it. I happen to know one of the people on that study personally. He asked me he said they could never afford they asked him to be on the panel. They said they could never afford my billing rate. I said, they can, and they'd be happy to have someone of your caliber on their panel. He didn't have any preconceived notions when he got into it. And there was a study done in Minnesota. All of these studies have basically come to the same conclusion as the study in Massachusetts, and that is that there's no demonstrated scientific evidence for a direct health effect from wind turbines. Yes, people can be annoyed. Yes, there can be noise. Yes, there can be flicker, but annoyance is not a health effect. All that said, we still want to be a good neighbor. We're going to be working with the town, we hope, for 15, maybe 25 years. So we want to figure out what we can do to work with the town. We also talked a little bit about what's called the nocebo effect and what we've seen from statewide opposition groups. As I said, we are sensitive. If people are annoyed, they're annoyed. We don't want people to be annoyed. We want them to be understanding. We want them to understand what the turbine does, what its positive impact is. We also want to understand their concerns. We hope to be around and operating the turbine for a long time with the town. There is what's called the nocebo effect, and recently there was an article in the New York Times and also in the Boston Globe about the nocebo effect. And I think everybody knows what a placebo is. When you do a health study, if you're testing drugs, some people get the drugs, some people get the placebo as a control. As part of that, you have to tell people whether they're getting the placebo or they're getting the actual drug, what the potential side effects of that medicine might be. And what they are finding is that a good percentage of people who are taking the placebo, taking a sugar pill, come down with the side effects that they were warned they might get. Even though there's no medical evidence, medical reason that they would come down with it, just talking about a potential side effect can produce that side effect. Which gets us to a group that we've run into at other sites called Windwise. They have been actively out there. They have a website. They've been spreading the wind turbine syndrome claims, other health claims, basically compiling everything they can on the web against wind turbines, putting it on their website, and disseminating that information. To me, it's a concern that disseminating bad information can actually be causing people to report adverse health effects. I don't know what we can do about it except to try to educate people in terms of what experts in the health industry say about the impacts of wind turbines. So next steps. We'd like to work with Scituate Board of Health. We want to understand neighbors' concerns. We understand that at your last meeting, a number of concerns were submitted. We'd like to get copies of those. We'd like to understand what's being said. We're happy to help you collect complaints and help you analyze them. If you'd like, we'll help you visit residents' homes to experience what the impact is. We'll walk around at 3 o'clock in the morning with you, if that's what it takes, to help understand what people are hearing and what the possible impact could be. We're sensitive that whether somebody has a headache and they think they think it's caused by the wind turbine, they don't think it's caused by the wind turbine, they have a headache, and that bothers them. We're sensitive that the wind turbine is going to be blamed for some of these items. And we're open to any other suggestions that might come in from the Board of Health in terms of how we could work with you. So that's basically the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. I appreciate that, and I can't thank the audience enough for allowing him to give that presentation. It means a lot, makes everything go smooth. One question I do have, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer if she has any questions, is there's a lot of information in this PowerPoint. Is this something we can somehow get to the audience? It's just more of those websites for information if anybody's interested. Is that something they can get at the office, or can you get copies?
We can give you a copy of the PowerPoint if you want to post it on your website, or we can...
That would work, because I think there's information, for better or worse, it's there, and I think it would be fair for everybody that they could take a look at that. So I think with that said, that'd be great. We'd get that on the website. Jennifer, would you like to ask any questions, please?
I don't know if you have the specifics on this, and I don't pretend to have any great expertise in this, but a lot of the residents have been emailing me some nightly or morningly of their last night's sleepless events, and a lot of them have been very good about trying to record either wind direction or wind speed from whatever the local weather is saying. And when you do your noise studies, is it based on wind in a certain direction, or the turbine being pointed in a certain direction, or how does that work?
Wind studies are basically, a noise study for a wind turbine is basically done on what's considered the worst case condition. Because from the map you saw that we looked at sites all around. It assumes that for every location, the wind is blowing from the turbine to that location. Okay, because the wind does carry some of the noise.
At a particular speed? Like
Well,
at a maximum wind speed?
The study looks at different wind speeds.
Okay.
For the noise.
But it takes it,
So, everybody, you're not going to have the same noise downwind as you are upwind. Okay. But for the study, it assumes that everybody's downwind. The other thing we can do is the wind turbine has a SCADA system. It collects wind speed, it collects wind direction.
Interesting.
It collects rotor speed, production output, lots of parameters, okay. But if you, as we said, if you want to share with us the information you're gathering, we can take a look at that and say what was going on at that particular point in time at the wind turbine. If the people are accurate about exactly when something was happening, we can go into the data system and say what was happening with the turbine at that point in time.
Okay, all
And we're
right,
happy to do that for you.
okay. And when you determined the height of the wind turbine, in some areas where they're sited on hills. Ours isn't. And it can face Third Cliff. And Third Cliff is, of course, a higher elevation than where the turbine's sited. How does that figure into design?
Okay, well, the town of Scituate put out an RFP, and they said, you will site the turbine here. We weren't told we could locate it any place in town. We were told we were going to locate it. And it's been 3 years or so since that RFP was out. I kind of recall they wanted a certain size equipment. I have to go back and look at the actual RFP requirements that we had to respond to. Basically, the town decided they wanted this turbine. A wind turbine comes with certain tax benefits. Also, they are looking for a certain amount of expertise, and the town didn't really basically want to gamble its own money. They wanted to use third parties, such as us, to design, build it, operate it, and the town would simply just get the benefits of the power from the turbine.
Okay, so What determined the elevation of, I mean, the height of the turbine?
Again, I have to go back and look at the RFP, whether that was a requirement.
Okay.
I know we.
Or was
did-
it the wind study, or, I don't know how that
Well,
works.
generally you want a turbine as high as possible. I mean, people are now putting things on, this is an 80-meter tower. People are now putting on 100-meter towers, 120-meter towers. You want it as high as possible, that's where the wind is.
Okay.
I believe, don't hold me to this until I double check it, that the town basically said it could not be higher than an 80-meter tower.
Okay.
Good?
Yeah, that's all
Michael,
I
you-
got for now. Oh, one more thing. You did all these studies for where the noise would go and what it was generating, and somehow you have a calculation of what level of noise it generates. But was it tested after it was in operation to validate that it was in that range?
We have not been out and done specific noise testing of the neighborhood. I live in Cohasset. I've been down here several times and driven out in the neighborhood and turned off my car and listened for noise. And you know, some days I can hear it, some days I can't hear it. But no, we've not hired anybody to go out and do a specific study.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to piggyback on that. On the Falmouth study and the Vinyl Haven one, how was that determined that it was exceeding the permitted noise levels? A study was done, an independent study.
Vinyl Haven was up in Maine. I haven't followed it that closely. I know that there are half a dozen neighbors that in Vinyl Haven, it's an island. Vinyl Haven's an island, and if they didn't like it. Most of the long-term residents say it's a lot better than when they used to run the diesel generator.
Well, the question is kind of what you answered, that an independent study to see that the turbine is operating within its...
I can't tell you what they did in Falmouth, if that's helpful. In Falmouth, at the request of Town of Falmouth, Massachusetts DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, came in and did a noise study. And they sampled background noise and they sampled sound with the turbine on. And based upon that, they did find violations. I will say that those are controversial violations. They are using a standard which is not in any permit for any power plant. It's not the way the most acoustical engineers go out and do their sampling and do their studies. But not my turbines in Falmouth. I'm not fighting that battle.
It generates 24 hours. It's designed to go 24/7.
It's designed to go whenever the wind is strong enough, yes. Anytime.
And what is the
day or night.
minimum wind? Just for reference.
I think 3 meters per second.
And what's the max? It does have a max.
It'll shut down at probably about, gotta do my conversions. You want?
Hurricane gale wind.
Yeah, you know, basically almost hurricane force winds.
But my question is, what is it tested at? When the tests are done, is it running at, say it has to be 10 miles an hour to run, and it shuts down at 60? What are these tests done at?
Tests are done over a range of operating conditions for the turbine, and we have a noise guarantee on the turbine, so we would find that it's not meeting its manufacturer's requirement, which we use the manufacturer's guaranteed noise level when we did the study. If we were to find that it was not meeting that noise requirement, the manufacturer come back in and fix it. It's tested, as I said, it's tested over a range of wind speeds. Over a certain wind speed, basically the wind noise, just the wind itself is going to be noisier than the turbine, it's just going to mask it.
And does that peak, like if it's 30 miles an hour, to go from 30 to 45 miles an hour on wind, does it make more noise? it's going faster, I mean, does it make,
The turbine-
does the noise
As the wind
peak?
passes the blades of the turbine, yes, it will make more noise, but the general increase in noise level just from the wind means that the wind is louder than the turbine. And when you, if you look at that, the studies that are in the PowerPoint, and you look at what the background was and what the projected noise level was from the turbine, and then it's a complicated formula to actually add those up to see what the increase is. But if the wind noise, if the background noise is higher than the turbine noise, then there's not going to be any increase in the, as a result of the turbine.
And when you have listed the ambient noise, is that average ambient noise almost anywhere? I mean, does ocean waves affect that? Does car traffic on Driftway? I mean, and why does it go down at night?
Generally, there's less activity at night. If you stand on the Driftway and hear the cars going by, there's a lot of noise. Things just tend to get quieter in that. That's why most sampling for background noise is done at night and in winter conditions, as we did here in Scituate. Because you don't have the birds chirping, the crickets chirping, and you don't have the leaves rustling in the wintertime.
And the flicker is predictable. Is our prevailing winds, we pretty much have two directions of is our wind directions predictable?
Yes, fairly so. And I didn't bring a wind rose with me, but I can get that for you. I mean, it's also in the studies that were done for the town before we ever got involved. We didn't take meteorological readings, and you can correlate that with long-term history at airports. But basically, you've got a good wind regime here. Most of it blowing toward the water.
So in the 360, there's going to be 50% that very rarely gets the direct, the turbine very rarely points in a couple different directions.
I'm happy to send you a wind rose. I'm going to tell you the frequency of wind from different directions.
I mean, I may still have others, but those are some of the ones that are off the top of my head.
Yeah. Frank?
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. First, can you explain to us how the noise study was done that led to determining that it was not going to be in exceedance of the DEP standards?
I'm not sure what you mean, but I'll...
Well, the impression I've got is that once constructed, the turbine hasn't been tested.
Correct.
Okay, so some sort of study was done that said, okay, if we build this thing, we're going to be within the DEP noise standards, right? Okay, so how do you do that? Is that a model,
Yeah,
or is it?
There are models that do that.
Okay.
What we did do is we went out and sampled in the winter, nighttime conditions, determined what the background levels were in the area. As I said, we weren't happy with the first study, which just generally the Massachusetts DEP policy for wind is to look at the closest receptor. Because the closest receptor was also being affected by the wastewater treatment plant, we asked them to go out and sample further away where it might be quieter and forecast what the noise might be there. We saw it from that study, and I quickly went through. Farther away from the turbine actually has a bigger impact because it's a quieter part of town than right next to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
There are studies that do that, yes.
So what you did is you took measurements of the ambient background and then applied a model, okay, rather than not an actual measurement of what the turbine was going to be on site, because it hadn't been built yet, right?
Correct.
Okay. At any point, is there any contemplation by the company that there's going to be some testing, actual testing, to determine whether the turbine is complying with what the model predicted the noise would be?
We had not planned to do so, but it could be done.
Could be done. How hard is that?
It's, I don't know, you send some people out. The problem is getting, where do you want those samples taken? At what wind speeds?
Right.
Okay, and if you want, 4 different locations and they're in different directions, and you want them at, cutting wind speeds, and you want them at the design wind speeds, that's a lot of nights that you're out there sampling. It can be done.
It seems that there's a lot of interest in this, obviously,
Mhm.
and so there's been more than just an isolated complaint, I would say. And probably everybody would like to know what the actual impact would be. It seems to me, and I think you've going partially down this road from what you've commented in your materials, that we should get a better sense from the community. I mean, Jennifer started to get a sense from the community what the complaints are. It seems to me to be mostly noise, but I don't know if that's, there are some other complaints as well. When they occur, and then maybe try and actually test as to whether the turbine is compliant with the regulations or not.
That could be done. And then the other thing that you want to determine, depending on how adversarial some people might be on this, is basically sometimes people just don't trust the developer. Okay, we're going to hire independent a noise engineer to go out and do the sampling, and if it comes back and shows that we're in compliance, we'll say, well, we don't believe it. So
Right.
we would, if we were going to do such a study, an actual sampling study, we'd want to figure out a way to do it in conjunction with Scituate Board of Health, so that whatever results we get are not being questioned as we somehow manipulated.
Yeah, because then you just wasted all that money. Right. Right.
That brings up a point, I just want to piggyback on that. Those tests, are you licensed like a land surveyor or an engineer to do that, where you know what I mean? You got to follow by the
Me
law?
personally, no.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
No, we go out and hire an acoustical engineer to go out and do the sampling. They have the equipment, they know how to set things up, they know how to read it out. It's not my job.
yeah. No, I was just, I was thinking the way you had put that. I mean, you hire a land surveyor anywhere in the state of Massachusetts, they got to do what they got to do with the law. So that's why I say, you brought that point up.
How is what an acoustical engineer does different than what DEP does?
Essentially the same. DEP is, I don't want to badmouth DEP in a public meeting. They're using very old technology, rather than, nowadays you have continuous recording with meters. So you can go, what went on during the whole time you're sampling. DEP protocol is, forget now, they take a reading, I think, every 5 seconds from their noise meter. And they're trying to also screen out, was that noise from the turbine, was that noise from, a car driving by? So they're screening it out. It's a DEP is very
Antiquated.
person intensive.
Interesting. Any more questions for him?
Well, how much experience do you think we need to have in terms of feedback from the community and data from the community before we should set up some type of study, if we're going to do that?
I don't want to judge that for you. I mean, that's the Board of Health's decision. As I said, if you have complaints, if you have, daily complaints or hourly complaints, we're happy to, get a log of those and go through and let you know what was happening at the turbines at that point in time. And from that, try to make a more informed decision.
And more test that direction or time or wind speed, focus on the.
Determine if, if that's the way we want to sample, yes.
The reason my question is, what I don't want to see happen is we go through this process, and let's say we set up a test in a month from now, and then, we're still in less than a year's worth of experience with the turbine, and we haven't covered all the seasons. So what I don't want to see happen is to do a test, and then people say, well, you didn't do the springtime, so your test, sort of what you were saying before, your test is no good. And I guess we should look at what the neighbors and residents are saying about that as well, because I think they've got to understand that if we're gonna, I'm not prejudging this either, as to whether we're gonna do something like this or not, but if we're gonna do it, you only wanna do it once.
The other
We
thing
have
is,
to agree on the format.
Yeah.
I believe, I've seen that Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, MassCEC, I believe has an RFP on the street looking for a firm to go out and do sampling at turbines, and, you know, maybe work Scituate to call MassCEC and say, if you're testing around, we'd like you to test our neighborhood.
Yeah, that might be a good idea.
Yeah, I think I've been online looking things up. I've got two of the studies that you've mentioned, and one's 85 pages, one's 135 pages. I'm gonna have to go in a library somewhere and read them, because I can't get it done in my office. But I did come across that Mass Clean Energy has got one that's due out, I think, in a year. And there's another one that's going to be out in 2 years, I think. Somebody else is doing it, I forget who, but it'll be, I think, definitely the Massachusetts one, I think maybe out by next summer, maybe. Yeah, but I think they'll definitely show a lot of more information than, has been available before. But I think maybe contacting them that, maybe that's one way to go. I don't know what their parameters would be in their timeframes for sampling of, different seasons, different directions, different speeds, but it's
that?
certainly worth a shot to mention it to
Right.
So right now, as I promised to get you.
Don't worry, I'll call you.
You guys know, that's fine.
Yeah. No, it's certainly something to consider.
Well, thank you, guys, thank you. I'm going to open it up to the audience.
Don't forget to have it signed in.
Are we doing a sign-in list, or are we going to do the whole room with the sign-in list, or are we just going to have them?
Just the speakers.
Yeah, all right, yeah. As I said before, name and address, please, and we'll open it up if there's any questions. Please, right back there.
Hi, my name is Sally Rossi Orman, and I live at 2071 Road up on Third Cliff. First of all, I'm pro-wind. I'm pro alternative energy, but I'm also pro-learning from our mistakes. And I think what we're trying to do here is find out whether the turbine in our area is causing us problems, where so many of us are having difficulties with sleep or with headaches or with whatever placebo or non-placebo effect we're feeling from this turbine. My question is twofold. One, the study that you took of the wind sound effects prior to building the turbine, those would be the same parameters that you would retest once the turbine is up, I'm presuming. And if your words were, we picked the worst case scenario when we tested for the sound. So I'm assuming that we would learn from that and find out when we do our testing to see whether or not this turbine is causing any kind of above sound tolerance, that it would be done in the same parameters, the same locations, the same conditions, because you can't compare apples to oranges. You'd have to have as much as you could in that type of testing. So it would probably be whenever that worst case scenario is, which I'm assuming is winter time because of the lack of leaves on the trees and the secondary sounds. The other question that I have was, the wording that you used was that Scituate kind of told you, or told the group, where to put this turbine. And I gotta say, I don't think that any of us are real experts on this, and I think that that's what kind of we're hiring other experts to do. And if it's all about capturing the wind at its tallest point, why do you put it at sea level? Why isn't it put on the tallest, public land in Scituate? Why be put next to the, I'm just asking this as a question, maybe because the wind's blow better next to the beach, or more frequently or something, but if it's really about height, then why put it at sea level and not, on the proving grounds or someplace that has a little elevation? And those are my two questions. And I really appreciate all the data that you've given us tonight, and I do appreciate you facing us. Just wanted to let you know that too.
Absolutely, please.
You can never exactly repeat the same conditions.
Right.
Every night's different.
It's nature.
Okay. What we would do, if we did another testing, assuming that protocol is accepted, we would, again, whether we're working with Mass CEC, if Board of Health hires some consultant, or they ask us to do it, our approach is generally that we can, with the SCADA system, we can remotely access the turbine, and we can sample the noise, the background noise, and then we can turn the turbine on. So immediately we can tell the difference. Can't do that in a hypothetical study, but we can do that now. We can turn the turbines on and off and tell you what the exact impact is at that point in time. I can't do this every 15 minutes for the next 3 years, but we go out and do a study for an evening with the wind at a certain direction, the wind at a certain speed, and we take a series of measurements with the turbine on and the turbine off. If that answers your question. That's how we would propose to go about it.
Okay, so basically using wherever you had sampled prior.
We could do that, yes.
In other words, what we're saying is like maybe up on 2,000 feet away, it's actually louder because we're up, in level with the blades. We're not down next to the base of it. We're not down in the river or anything. And maybe more sound could be picked up
If I could comment.
or measured.
Excuse me, yep.
My point of view on that would be, I think, a little bit different, but this would be something that we'd need to work out in designing the study. I think the study should be focused more on where the problem is than whether we were right or wrong in originally permitting the turbine. The issue is whether in certain areas, I think, it's causing excessive noise, and that's why I think it's important. I know the residents in the neighborhood have already heard at the last meeting, but if they can report to the Board of Health, the times and conditions under which they're experiencing adverse impacts in their perception, I think then we can use that information to help us figure out where we should focus the study. Because I'm not particularly interested in confirming that there's no noise over here if nobody's complaining about it over here. So I think this is going to be, in designing any study like this, there's a lot of factors that go into it. There's a lot of factors that are beyond my competence. So we would need to look at the engineering people and seek their advice as to how you could best do that to answer all of your questions.
Thank you.
Can I finish?
Excuse 1 second, sir. You're not, okay, yeah, please do finish.
And just to be clear, the farther away you are from the turbine, the less the sound will be, but its effect could be more compared to the background. The background is much less. Okay, so the noise is going to always dissipate with distance. Your second question dealt with site selection.
Right.
Why we didn't put it on a hill? Believe me, I'd love to have it 100 feet higher on a hill. Again, that wasn't our choice. That was the town's choice. They did several studies before we ever got involved. We picked this location primarily because it's right next to the wastewater treatment plant, which is probably the town's biggest consumer of electricity. And I think that's what they complained, hook the turbine into the wastewater treatment plant.
Is it hooked into the...
Excuse me 1 second, sir. Finish? Yeah, thank you. The fellow right behind you. I'll get to you next, sir. Thank you.
My name is Joey Kelly. I live at 56 Moorland Road, within 1,000 meters of the wind turbine. I had 2 no-see-level events a week ago Friday, one at midnight, one at 3 a.m. So, and I wasn't taking a sugar pill at the time. I think the reason why you cited it there is that's the only commercially zoned land in town. And that's why it was cited there. The higher elevations are not commercially zoned. I read through everything that was presented to the town, every single word of it. And what confounds me is that the acoustic study that is supposed to measure the noise that we would have to bear was based upon 3 turbines, General Electric and 2 others. And you folks installed a 3rd that was not studied. Why did you do that?
I believe what you're referring to is the original study, I think, done by KEMA for the town. Not the data I presented here, which was projected noise from the specific turbine.
Which study that was part of the approval process?
This study for the permit was done based upon this particular turbine.
But that's not in the public domain.
Hold on, yeah.
Sorry.
That's not in the public domain, and everything that I've read has not indicated that. As a matter of fact, the acoustic studies were based upon wind turbines that you folks did not choose to install. As a matter of fact, I think you've installed 2 of the 4 of these turbines that have been, that as of last year, have been installed in the United States.
We've installed Loomis, who's Soleil, as part of this, has installed 4 turbines. Palmer has done 3 or 4 turbines.
Yet nobody else has chosen to install these turbines.
Much to the dismay of the manufacturer, but that has nothing to do with the fact that we did do a noise study on this particular turbine. I'm sure it's part of the public record at the planning board.
Okay, we'll see if we can get it. Thank you for answering.
Thank you, thank you. Excuse me one second. Sir, did you have anything to follow up on that, or?
I'll let this gentleman go ahead of me, please.
Okay, thank you. Sir, yes.
McKeeba, 151 Driftway. On the initial study that was put on my property, there was no inclination whatsoever stating that it was a construction site. Now, obviously, you would like to have the noise elevated, which would make the permitting that much easier. And my question to you is, why was that not stated that it was a construction site and not just my yard, at the time?
Christine, yeah.
I'm not sure I follow your question.
Can I-
The fact that we were going to build it, or?
No.
I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, at the time that the study was done, his house was under construction. So he feels that it was a construction site as opposed to a normal residential yard. Is that correct?
You had done 2 studies. One of them was done before I was still living on the property. And then I had asked, why aren't you doing this study up on the hill, where obviously this study was probably 10 to 15 feet below where my house sits. And you had to kind of talk to a few people, and then you brought this unit apparently up for a short period of time to analyze this noise. You analyzed the noise and got all this data, but when the data was presented, nothing was stated that it was on a construction site. And that, to me, obviously, you want to have the noise to be elevated so this thing can fall within the parameters of the zoning. But to me, you've got air hammers and compressors and heavy equipment running around all day, and you're recording all that noise, which is what you need in order for this to pass. And nothing was ever stated, nothing in those articles, that it was on a construction site.
Pardon me if I'm still a little confused. Your house was under construction in 2010 when this study was done?
No, it was 2009. You had done it originally, that was down, and I can show you the oak tree right now if you want to come to my house. And it was done there, and then you moved it about 30 feet up on top of the hill, and that's when I was building my house, and that's when it was under construction. You brought the data came out, and it never was stated that the house was under construction, that this data was taken during a construction site.
And was it under construction at 2 o'clock in the morning when we were taking the noise readings?
No, it was, during the daytime, it was under construction, obviously. Do you work at midnight? Do you work at 2 o'clock in the morning?
We're not outside.
Obviously, you know the answer to that question. No, there wasn't a construction.
Let's
site.
not get argumentative about it. Question's been posed. Thank you.
I understood your point, that the noise was taken at night when there was not construction noise, but does anyone else have?
We'd have to go back and look at the study, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a valid point, and
So
we can look at that. Sir,
it seems
please,
that the-
name and
Alex
address.
Alvarez, 53 Collier.
Thank you.
So first thing is, I can't see the thing from my house, right? I look out towards the ocean. So kind of the implication that people come up with this because we don't like the way it looks kind of doesn't apply to me, at least, right? Second thing is, it seems like who does this study is pretty important because no one here really knows about this. And they don't seem to like the DEP. They don't seem the guys that did one down in Falmouth, it's controversial. And, you know, he's kind of saying, hey, I like the clean Massachusetts thing, which sounds to me like people who like windmills, and maybe have a bias. So I think it's really important for the Board of Health to find someone who's either not going to be biased or find two that are really biased, do two studies and compare them,
Come up
right?
to the middle.
Instead of trying to find someone who's, you know.
That's a
so
good point. That's a very good
I
point.
think it's going to be hard to find someone in this that has expertise and also is, you know, not kind of built a business out of going one way or the other.
Right. No, that's a good point. Very good point. We'll look at that.
But then again, you want somebody who has experience.
That's why I say, find two guys that have been on the opposite sides, give you guys the data and you can make a determination.
Any other input from the audience? Hold on one second. Is there anybody else? Please, sir.
I had a couple of Paul McSorley, 37 Lads Way. Through the chair, thank you. Mr. Dean, you mentioned that the original study, the noise study that was, you were not satisfied with it. You recall that, saying that? Then it was done again?
Yeah, we thought that they should do additional background sampling and additional projections out into the neighborhood as opposed to, you know, the DEP noise policy is based on the closest residents. And we thought that, given the wastewater treatment plant, they should look elsewhere, and that's what they did.
When the study, you mentioned so many decibels, the levels of decibels, and then you mentioned the wind speed tonight. The minimum that would work would be 3 meters per second. I've never heard of any speed mentioned. You know, usually it's per hour or whatever, but why 3 meters per second? Could you just translate what that is? Or, I mean, I'm afraid that when we get this study done and that we're going to be given this information, it's going to be basically Greek, and it should be more so the layperson can understand it. And I think we're explaining it, you know, that when we're sending the emails to Ms. Sullivan, you know, it's not maybe as precise, but we're just saying it's a noise that we're hearing at 2 o'clock in the morning, whether it be a cloud cover. I don't know if a cloud cover would keep the noise compressed down, if a clear night would make it, you know, more, you could hear it more, or that type of thing. So I think it just has to be a little bit clearer, you know, where the, you know, how the study is done, so that it's believable to all. But, I mean, you know,
Your criteria.
I think it sounds almost like for definition to say, do miles per hour for wind speed, or knots, something that, instead of 3 meters per second, I mean, is that something that's calculatable pretty easy?
Shut off at hurricane
Yeah.
force winds. I mean, I've seen it shut off during, you know, windier times than that, so it's just, a lot of it's just unclear.
I mean, that's something that can be done for language, to put it into miles per hour that people can more grasp. Yeah.
And
All
I
right.
have a question as well.
Yeah.
And we'll follow up on his question.
Sure, yeah, please, Mike. yeah. Thank you, sir. Are you done? I'm sorry, Mike.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
How much, when the variables do change, whether it be cloud cover, or how much does that, it's kind of a broad question, but changing those variables, whether it be cloud cover or whatnot, how incremental would that be on noise? Would it be, would it go from 7.5 to 7.6, or could it go from 7.5 to 9?
Kind of holding one parameter and
Well, then what's the worst?
Just changing one parameter.
What is the worst parameter that would increase the noise?
I would,
If that's,
I'm not a acoustical engineer.
Okay.
I'd rather not try to answer that. I guess, I'll probably say something wrong.
Fair enough.
We'd have to look at that in the study, I would say.
Yeah, no.
You know, fog as opposed to cloudy, as
Correct.
opposed to
It would be probably-
clear sky.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want me doing it during a thunderstorm, I mean,
Yeah.
lots of times when.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Sir,
Pat Ronan with the Patriot Ledger. I'm not a town resident, but...
that's fine. Open to the floor.
I have a question about, you said that the second study had several other locations. Do you know how many sites were used and where those other locations were specifically? I mean, the first one was 151 Driftway. The second one was other sites. What were the other sites?
It's in the study, it's in the PowerPoint presentation. I can get you a copy of that if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on one second, sir. You spoke once. I want to make sure everybody else gets a fair shake, too. Is there, please?
Hi, Michelle Bannon, 139 Gilson. Sir, are you associated with Fairhaven Wind LLC?
Yes, I am.
I have a letter here to the Board of Health of Fairhaven, where you have made the same offer to analyze complaints by people to assist. Just wondering what specifications you use, even though it's in 15 pages. If I may read something. On page number 3, it says, this makes one question of validity of many of the complaints or rationale for why people are complaining. Table 2 presents our analysis of the complaint. It attempts to identify, to the extent we have information or can make reasonable assumptions, the total number of households that have complained about a turbine, whether such households have sued the town, whether such households have taken public position, example, via letters or newspaper against the turbines before they were built and operational, households which only have complained about the turbines once they were operational, and households which have not been identified. In addition, we separately list the households which have complained only once. Why is that relevant if we are experiencing complaints and health issues and noise and flicker? Why is that relevant, sir?
Well, you're pulling a paragraph out of a 15-page letter to Town of Fairhaven, addressing things that they asked us to address. I just don't think it's relevant here for Scituate.
I just want the board to be aware that there seems to be, in my humble opinion, a lot of shooting the messenger for this analysis, and we greatly appreciate you coming out to our house at 3 o'clock in the morning and listening to it with us, so you can understand that there is valid concerns here, but I don't appreciate somebody taking a stab at a character to make that point.
So noted. So noted. Thank you. Sir in the back, please.
Paul O'Reilly, 127 Gilson Road. I'm about 3,300 feet away. Just to add to the point, with all due respect, I think the presentation was nice and everything, but, we're talking about studies here. I don't need studies right now to tell me that, I've been at this residence for 50 years, and suddenly I'm having issues with sleep, and I can hear this thing almost every night, okay? So to me, that's an issue. But the other question, this might be to the board more, is we keep talking about studies. This is happening now, okay? It's been, 3 weeks since the last meeting? My question is, what's going to happen now? Can we mitigate this somehow by at least shutting it down at night? Can the board take those steps? Or what's going to happen? We keep talking about, you know, studies in fall and spring and whatever. I'm worried that this is going to be a year's study. You know, we're living with this now. So that's the question I have, is exactly, you know, what's going to happen tomorrow on this?
I don't want to speak for the rest of the board members. I wasn't here the last time, but this is not an easy issue scientifically, having read a lot of the different studies. So I hear you on the one hand. On the other hand, the DEP and a lot of other agencies have studied these things and set decibel levels that, if you knew what they were probably 3 or 4 years ago, you might have gone to the planning board and said, hey, we don't want this turbine going up. But it's there, and now we have to figure out whether it's having any health impacts on you and whether it's actually in violation of any of these standards. So unfortunately, that's not something, if you're going to do it the right way, I think you can do overnight. And I want to do it the right way.
Yeah, I understand that, but the one thing I want the board to know is that everyone in this room is being effective now. And even the fact to wait till the next meeting and the next meeting, you know, going to bed at night and I hear this thing and I just can't get to sleep because it's just vibrating right through the house. You know, I don't know what decibel is. If it's 8 decibels, it's still bothering me. And even if that study goes and it passes, it's still going to affect my sleep. It's not going to change. So I don't know how studies are going to even solve the problem at all, because if it's above 10 decibels, what are they going to do? Shut it down. If it's not, they're just going to say, everybody in this room, doesn't make a difference, sorry. That's my issue. So I think, I understand that studies need to be done, but to me, it's going to be a waste, because I don't think anybody's problems are going to go away in this room, whether that study comes out positive or negative.
Thank you. Please. Yeah. Yeah, please don't, I'm sorry.
Ruth Thompson with the Scituate Mariner. I just have a question. You did studies before the turbine was built with models. Why wasn't a study done after it was built, when it was live online? And obviously there's a huge difference between live online and model studies. Why wasn't a study done? And you said that there wasn't one plan. Why wasn't it done when it was live, after a month or so?
As I said, the turbine went into operation in March. It wasn't until August that the town had any complaints about noise or flicker or visibility or anything. So no study was planned. We have been in the neighborhood many times and listened. I'm not prowling around people's houses at 3 o'clock in the morning.
So it's standard procedure not to do a follow-up live study once it's up and going? Is that like an industry procedure policy, or?
It's not standard procedure. No.
So they don't do follow-up studies? That's not the standard procedure, or they do?
Well, it's not a condition of our permit. It doesn't mean that if Board of Health asks us to, or we work out the proper protocol, conduct another study.
Thank you. Does that answer the question?
Not really. I mean, the question was, like, what, it sounds like they were going to wait for the Board of Health to tell them to do a study. But my question is, why didn't the company initiate its own study after it was up online, rather than just do the model study before? I mean, a model is a model. I mean, I would think if it was my company, I'd want to have the study done to make sure everything was 100%.
There's a certain level of accountability.
I guess so.
It's like buying something. This is what it says it's going to do.
Thank you. Please. Hold on, guys. Let me make sure everybody, is there anybody else? Questions? No, please. Yeah, name and address, please.
Shauna Coon, 47 Welland Road. Do you live in close proximity to a working wind turbine?
No, I do not.
Would you?
Yes, I would.
About my house?
Hold on one second. Did you have a question too, ma'am? Thank you.
Heather Doffany, 53 Beaver Dam Road. My concern is that Mr. Dean has said on more than one occasion that people are just coming forward now. A lot of us didn't know that other people were being affected. And I think that that's why. And one other comment I might make is I go up and down the Driftway 6 times a day, and the flickering even in the street is a distraction. I have a home on Third Cliff. I live at Beaver Dam Road. I have a tenant who lives in my home on Third Cliff who is constantly complaining about noise. And I don't know if I want to retire there now.
Any other questions, comments? Sir, please.
My name is Jerry Kelly still.
Yeah.
I've got a question about the acoustic study. Third Cliff is a unique area topographically. The marsh floods, which really amplifies any noise whatsoever. As a matter of fact, 20 years ago, we had repeated weddings, outdoor amplified music weddings going on at the country club. I could tell you every single popular wedding song and all the names of everybody in the wedding party on selected nights. If it was flooded, we were participants in the wedding. If it wasn't, I couldn't hear it. So that's very important with an acoustic study, to take into effect that flood tide that we get. And it doesn't happen every night, and it doesn't happen, it happens with a full moon.
We're in the lunar cycle right now.
Yeah, and if one's going to do a study, please take that into account.
That's a good point. Yeah, and we're in the lunar cycle right now. There's 12-foot tides.
Yep, I could see it tonight from my house.
Yeah, noontime. Yeah. Thank you. Sir?
Thank you. My name's Tom Thompson. I live at 149 Gilson Road. I'm located approximately 3,000 feet from the industrial wind turbine. I used to actually be a neighbor of Ms. Cahoon's over at 8 Brown Avenue. I've been in the area for 5 years. And I can tell you without the benefit of any kind of a study that the impacts in our area since this industrial wind turbine has started operating in March have been significant and profound. I know that there was a point made that there's been really no community complaints issued since August. I've talked to a number of my residents and my neighbors, and I believe that this lady just brought this issue forward as well, is that there were people that have been impacted silently, dealing with headaches and dizziness and nausea and the like for months, trying to personally understand how these things could be impacted. And as people started to discuss this thing collectively as neighbors, April, May, June, July, it became quite evident that there was a direct correlation between the date at which this industrial wind turbine in close proximity to a residential neighborhood started to operate, and my neighbors started to be negatively impacted health-wise as a result. I have to say, Mr. Palmer, we appreciate you coming. We really do. It takes, obviously, you knew that you weren't going into necessarily a friendly environment. I think hopefully we treated you cordial. I do know that you live in Cohasset, who decided not to embrace an industrial wind turbine when given the opportunity. I also note that the 2 largest financial stakeholders in this particular project are also the hosts of this meeting. So just for the record, I think that that's an important thing to identify. I think we have, I mean, I just speak for myself personally, some real concerns about the trust around any studies that have either been completed to date or are going to be completed in the future. I think it's well documented that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has aggressively embraced renewable energy, and we all support renewable energy here. We just haven't quite figured out why an industrial wind turbine has been placed in such close proximity to a residential neighborhood. And I thank you for confirming that that actually was a determination, a unilateral determination made by the town, apparently with no evident study as to location or impacts as a result of that. We've got the green community designations where communities now are typically sacrificed a portion of their approval process for a special permit process, and the same government is going through an initiative, I understand, some regulation called WESRA, which is a permit which would allow for no local input at all. So I think that speaks to the Commonwealth's position on these renewable energy strategies and standards and the lack of input that they're looking for from folks in residential neighborhoods that have been negatively impacted, such as us. I was a little disappointed that the health concerns of this group seem to be in some respects trivialized or discounted, that it's the aesthetics of the thing, which is not true, that are causing concerns for our neighbors. That was referenced by Mr. Palmer earlier on tonight. I made note of this. And I am also concerned that please let me finish, and you folks can...
It's Mr. Dean.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Palmer Capital.
that's all.
I'm sorry. Thank you for cutting it.
I've been called worse.
No, it's okay. That's as bad as it's going to get tonight, I promise you. Well, our concerns are based on impacts on health and on safety. Our concerns are based on impacts to the McKeever's children and other folks in our neighborhood that are children and seniors that have been negatively impacted. These are well-intentioned health complaints and emails. These are people that are stepping forward and publicly disclosing health issues that they would otherwise want to retain in the private domain. And I'm very, very concerned that we're going to have this continuing conversation. I think Mr. Warrenberger pointed to this, around studies and impact studies and this study and that study. And we've already seen the negative effects around the room since March of this year. So I'm formally advising you that as residents of Scituate, within 600 feet to 3,800 feet of this industrial wind turbine, is that we are expecting this Board of Health to render the appropriate decision within 30 days of this meeting. And we look forward to continuing to bring this issue forward. We're open to dialogue, et cetera, but we think that there has been enough, with respect, enough evidence submitted by my neighbors and my friends, personally and individually disclosing the concerns that they've had around this industrial wind turbine. And I thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Anybody that hasn't spoken yet? Ma'am?
I just wanted to make Heather Dauphin again. I just
Sure.
wanted to make another comment that I did live on Third Cliff permanently until I was 30. And it was, a great place to grow up. That's why I haven't sold the house and plan on retiring there. But I'm really concerned because I'm a light sleeper. And where my tenant has voiced complaints to me, and then I read all the stuff in the newspapers, I'm like, well, you know what? Do I want to go there? I thought I had my whole life planned out. Do I really want to go there? And then if I don't want to go there, am I going to be able to sell the home anyway? Because I don't know what the values are going to be with all the negative impact up there. So it's a real concern for me. And I've lived in this town for 54 years. So I just hope you really think about what all these neighbors up there are going through, because I don't want to go through it either. It's very disheartening. It was a great place to live. And it seems like from everyone's comments, it's not so great anymore.
Point taken.
And don't quote her on that.
Well, we've got some information from both sides. We've got comments. I know you're looking at 30 days. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. To me, I think we've got something to work with, and I know you're not going to want to hear this, but with the studies, there was a plan presented at the last meeting that showed concentrated areas of where the complaints were and what we have, and I'm hoping that both sides can work together here and see, where we stand, and I mean, this board's right in the middle, and we've got to look at it. We are the Board of Health, And
You have the ability to render the decision of the health and safety of the residents of Scituate with respect, sir.
we do, and I understand that, and
And that's why we are here.
that, correct, and we appreciate it. That's, makes America America,
Absolutely.
the right to speak.
You hear
So,
every day that people that don't get enough sleep are just, their health diminishes significantly. If you don't have sleep, everything else starts to go down.
Why not just turn it off at night, so you figure it out?
That's, at this point, I don't know if we're ready to do that. I don't know if we're ready to do that.
What has to happen for you to make a decision about the overall health of all these people? We can't all be wrong. Everybody, you have a sampling from people who are in close proximity to every wind turbine, Falmouth, and all the others. We can't, we're not all crazy.
No, I don't think anybody's crazy in this room.
Maybe someone should do a study on sleep deprivation.
Well, that's
High
been
blood
done.
pressure.
That's been done.
Cardiovascular.
Sleep deprivation causes obesity, bad cognitive skills, and, reflexes and all that sort of thing. But we don't have to get into car crashes and have heart attacks for this, okay? But my question would be, how much more do you need? Do you need us to ramp up 40, 50, 60, 70 more people complaining about healthcare problems? Or, I guess we're trying to figure out if this ain't enough, what is?
And we're wrestling with that, too.
It's been heard. It's been heard very well, and presentations on both sides have been there. So,
I just want to reiterate the 30 days. I know you said you might not be ready to, act in 30 days. But to me, tomorrow, I wish it could act tomorrow. For me, it's bad enough. I'm 3,800 feet. I can't imagine what Mr. McKeever's going through. And for him, 30 days of torture. Okay, so to me, that's a huge health issue.
this board has put this at top priority, and we discussed that first thing at the meeting, so,
30 days from tonight is essentially 3 months of input and feedback that you've received from the people that you're responsible to serve.
Mhm.
So it's not as though we're just starting out of the blocks this evening.
right, understood, understood. One more, and,
Very brief.
yeah.
Thank you again for coming tonight. I think my friends here, there's a lot of other people, I think, that whether or not they may be, don't want to come here or maybe are afraid to speak up, that, if there was some outcry, I think you, as the Board of Health, would be shocked at the amount of people that this is affecting, not just us as a unit here. You'd be shocked. And I get that from out cutting my lawn. Some people sit and just stand there and look at it, and some apologize, some say that they're, well, why would you build a house there and stuff? But I think, again, there's a lot of people out in that neck of the woods that are affected that just aren't coming forward.
Haven't come forward. Understood. Understood. If there's anything else from the board?
Hang on a second. Do you have a thought as to what the next step is?
In my mind, it's an issue of, yes, we have legitimate health concerns, and then we have the other side where it's based on fact, and it's somewhere in the middle that's why I say the studies are something I'm looking at to.
Yeah, I would think that.
Excuse me.
Well, this is now a board conversation, if you all don't mind, unless somebody has something new to add. I'm just wrestling. I'm trying to decide whether we just continue this generally or whether we continue it with some more specific agenda in mind. And I'm leaning towards the latter right now. But I want to. My thought is that we continue the hearing on the wind turbine generally to the next meeting to specifically consider two things, maybe three. One, to determine whether the Board of Health should hire, can and should hire a consultant in conjunction, and how to fund a consultant to advise us as to how to conduct a study as to whether the Scituate Wind Turbine Company is in violation of its permit. Second, to consider whether we should ask the Scituate Wind Company to come in 2 weeks and advise us as to the feasibility of intermittently operating the wind turbine depending on conditions until we've figured out more definitively what the impact is on the community. And third, I'd like to get a report from Jennifer. She'll kill me. Basically summarizing the complaints that we've received and that's it. I won't give you any more. That's it. So I would phrase that in the terms of a motion to continue with this hearing for 2 weeks to our next meeting, which is usually in 2 weeks. I think it's 2 weeks from today, right?
Yeah, it should be 2 weeks from today. It's on the calendar.
To consider those three things.
On the feasibility of monitoring it, I think we should be moving in the direction of an independent study and the parameters we want to use for that. And then you're back to...
As I said, I think it's going to take some work to define the parameters and get it right so that everybody's going to be happy with it.
Yeah, there is a, Mr. Doherty, who was here at the last meeting, had a plan highlighting, where complaints were. I think that would be a great tool to work with any study, independent or not, or Scituate LLC does one and works with someone that does it independent, as it was brought up to have two. However it goes, somebody could question one or the other. I think it's an avenue to...
And who would we see, and who would we, would see the town administrator regarding a, hiring a consultant?
Yeah, but we may end up before
You have to see the selectmen.
the selectmen and the advisory committee as well. I mean, I don't know. Our budget can't handle it.
Well, that would be one of the things that I would ask the wind company to help us on as to, because they indicated a willingness to do the study. I assumed that meant funding part of the study. But that would be on the agenda for discussion as to what the town's participation would be, what the company's participation would be.
What's that?
You're going to second the motion?
Or further discussion, I put it out there for discussion. There's a gentleman from the audience who has a question.
If I may, there's three partners in this now. There's the town, there's the wind company, and there's this group here. So if you folks, I'm just speaking as one of many, and I'll confer with my colleagues after this.
Mm-hmm.
But in my view, you folks want to have any credibility on this, your independent consultant, and it's going to have to be independent, it's going to have to be approved by all three parties in this room. We're going to need to be involved in that process beyond just having somebody come to our house and give us 30 minutes of their time. We're going to need to be satisfied with the independence and the integrity of whoever conducts this. And it's going to have to be done in timely fashion. And as taxpayers, we've already paid an awful lot in this thing. So our money's already on the table. So I would just ask you to consider that with whatever deliberation you're going to have internally after we leave here.
Could I say two things in response to that?
Yeah.
First of all, I appreciate your concerns and the emotion to which you bring this. I am choosing not to interpret what you're saying as a threat, because I don't...
No, sir. No, and actually, my concerns are not emotional at all. I'm a career corporate finance individual. I've worked on reorganizations, restructuring, raised millions of dollars of capital in various environments. I'm a businessman. But there is a definite lack of trust in this room, if I might say. And all I'm saying is that it's not a threat. I think what it is that if you're trying to earn the trust of this community, where it has been broken in some cases, I think that is a reasonable request for us to be part of that process.
That's how I interpreted it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think that-
Hang on, I'm not quite finished yet. The second thing I wanted to point out to you, first time I let it pass a little bit, I think you all need to understand that the Board of Health is not the town, okay? The Board of Health is an independent entity. Boards of Health in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are sort of unique, and they've existed for 300 years. We're not the town. We often disagree with members of the town. We have to, for this situation, we have to deal with the town as well, okay? So there's more than just three.
Totally appreciate that.
Okay.
And so when I say there's three parties at the table, if it's the Board of Health and the wind company engaged in the independent study, then we're your third party. If it's the town of Scituate and the wind company, then we're the third party with the town of Scituate and the wind company. But you guys will give us the direction, I'm sure, as to how you'd like to proceed.
We need to, and part of the point that I'm making is we have a very small budget. We need to figure out a way to get this solved in a scientific and responsive manner to all of you on basically next to no money. So we're probably going to have to deal with the town on that and the Scituate, the wind company as well. So
We've also worked closely with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on this, and I'm sure that they would be an interested party to this in terms of providing some financial support.
That was going to be
There's other ways of doing this.
That was going to be the fourth mission I was going to ask Jennifer to take care of.
I mean, they clearly have a vested interest have all along in this, so I'm sure they've got a little bit of our taxpayer money they can throw at that.
Please, sir. Yeah.
I want to echo what Tom said. This is not about threats. We really appreciate your hearing us. We appreciate your giving your time for this. And we are not about threats. Read page 11 of the letter submitted to Fairhaven if you want to see threats. There was a threat of legal action to Fairhaven by the external legal firm for Palmer and for their partner there to the town of Fairhaven. So, I think that we need to understand the character of the entities present here. But once again, thank you very much.
Have you consulted with Falmouth at all, Board of Health down there, since they seem to be going through the same situation, and maybe they can have some expertise?
Have we considered with Falmouth?
Board of Health.
I haven't personally, no. No, have we?
Any plans to? Or other boards of health that are going to?
I'd refer that to Ms. Sullivan.
I know that Ms. Vincenzi and Al Bankert spent a day down at Falmouth. I wasn't involved in that visit, nor what they learned either. So I wasn't privy to that.
But that's not health related.
I don't know. I think it is. I think they went down there because there were some initial complaints, but I don't know. I just happened to find out by chance that that's what they did one day.
Is this an opportunity, perhaps? to get it on the table?
A Falmouth situation is, of course, each town's situation is not an exact replica of another town's. In their case, they had 3 of them. I think they're different engines, and in this case, the town actually owned them. Of course, we don't match any of that. So it makes our options a little bit more complicated because we don't own it. So I'm not sure that I can use their expertise.
So maybe their acoustic testing, things like that, their plan of action.
Well, I'm not sure we can make a plan of action work in 30 days. Yeah, I mean, I will look into it, but because we have different factors, I'm not sure how applicable it will be or helpful it will be, but I'll look into it.
Yes.
So Alex Alvarez, 53 Collier. So the only thing I hear a lot about scientific testing, and my concern here is that the problem might not, the science of acoustics and stuff might not be up to the problem. We're all familiar with the history of things like carcinogens and things like that, where for years companies said it's safe, GE said don't worry, that stuff at the bottom of the river won't hurt anybody, right? And I think one thing you need to be careful with is to bring your common sense to bear, because we trust you to kind of keep us safe, which, if there's, any, you can't just kind of, I think, go and say, oh, there's a study and it's good, right? If you see that there's real problems and your common sense says do something, I would expect you guys to do something.
Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to make one more comment. When everyone goes to sleep tonight, think about the people on Third Cliff that aren't sleeping and that are up every night. Because I wouldn't want to live like that. And the children.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Jim Trends, 20 Country Way. Is it possible to post the daily megawatt production so we can get a sense of the output?
We're working on a website to do that. The town's been pressing us to try to put together some sort of website for that.
Okay. What do you think that'll?
We don't do this.
I do.
I barely do PowerPoint.
If that could be information you could get to Jennifer and sometime, that would be nice. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
The motion's pending.
I got to ask, can you repeat that motion again?
I'll repeat it.
Thank you.
Okay.
For the record.
Determine if we can and should hire a consultant to advise how to study Scituate wind is in violation of the permit, whether to ask Scituate Wind to advise to a feasibility of intermittent operation until we determine impact, and do you want a report for me to summarize complaints and talk to DEP and Falmouth.
And Falmouth. Okay, so we will be addressing Falmouth. That's part of the motion.
That's number 4.
That's number 4. And that was it?
That's it.
I second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. That concludes discussion on Scituate wind turbine. So we'll continue for
Thank you
2
all for
weeks.
coming.
Thank you.
Very much.